first the speaker or first this? Okay. Good evening and welcome to the Ysleta Independent School District's meeting of the Board of Trustees. We invite you to share your comments with the board during the public comment portion of the meeting. Public comment sign-up cards show the rules for participating. Legally, the board may listen but may not enter into discussion on the issue raised. For the public hearing, if you have comments regarding the tax rate, please sign in at the table by the entrance using the public hearing sign-in sheet. Please turn off or silence all electronic devices, and thank you. This meeting of the Board of Trustees is called to order at 6:06 p.m. We have a quorum with Charlie Bustillos, Soltero Ramirez, Richard Cuder, Mike Rosales, Connie Woodruff, Catherine Lucero, and myself, Cruz Ochoa. Trustee Lucero, will you lead us into the pledge and moment of silence?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Thank you.
Dr. De La Torre, do you have a presentation for us this evening?
President Ochoa, members of the board, esteemed guests, we do have a presentation this evening from Hilltop Securities, the district's financial advisor. Please help me welcome Mr. Jeff Roberts.
Thank you, Dr. De La Torre, President Ochoa, members of the board. Jeff Robert with Hilltop Securities. Tonight I'm going to share with you the same presentation that we'd gone over with the committee, the bond committee at the end of July, I believe it was. I'm not going to go through it in detail, but in talking with Ms. Leeper, we thought it might be beneficial to have some of the kind of the bonds 101 type information in there, and hopefully you might be able to look through that. I know some of you have been through the bond election process, and some of you haven't at this stage. And as I had mentioned to Mr. Rosales before the meeting, I apologize to him. He was there at that committee meeting, so he's going to have to try and stay awake the second time as I go through this. But if you have questions as I go through it, please don't hesitate to stop me, and I'll do the best I can to answer them. You can see there's several pages here. Like I said, I'm going to try and go through them quickly. The first 3 or 4 pages are just frequently asked bond questions, and with the committee, we talked about what is a bond and how it's very similar to a home mortgage. Obviously, we're talking about a larger dollar amount. The difference is that the district, thankfully, gets to pay lower tax-exempt interest rates, and it is a fixed rate. Whenever you do a large bond authorization, or school districts do that, typically they sell them in multiple issuances, which I believe would be the plan here as well. How are the bonds repaid? I know you're all familiar with your tax rate and the M&O tax rate that pays to keep the lights on, payroll, that kind of thing. The interest and sinking fund tax rate is the tax rate that's levied only for the repayment of voted bonded indebtedness. And there at the bottom, very important, the limitation for districts in terms of what capacity they have to issue is calculated by the Attorney General 50-cent test. So we have to prove to the Attorney General that we can service all of your debt service with a 50-cent INS tax rate. The term or payback period, usually any term between 20 and 35 years is what you're looking at for capital expenditures. Whether it's bricks and mortar type facilities, you do have a maximum legal term of 40 years that's by statute. The interest rate. We've made some assumptions on what the interest rate will be. However, we don't know what the interest rate on any of the issues will be until you actually price an issue. Once again, the interest rates are tax exempt. You have an excellent underlying AA rating with the rating agencies, and then also you get the permanent school fund guarantee, which gives you a AAA rating. So as I like to say, whenever you decide to issue bonds, you'll get the most competitive rates in the markets nationwide. Talk a little bit about state funding. Ysleta ISD receives what's called existing debt allotment funding for some of its existing debt, and then you also have an issue that receives the instructional facilities allotment funding. Both of these state funding percentages are about 49%, meaning the state pays for about 49% of the debt service, and you pay for 51%. Now, you can't receive both IFA and EDA on $1 of debt service. So you can't say I get 49% IFA, 49% EDA, so I only pay 2%. Each dollar of debt service receives right now either EDA or IFA. However, once you get past 29 cents, there's no more EDA funding available unless the legislature takes action to appropriate or approve more dollars under that program. The IFA state funding program is a little different because we actually have to apply whenever you do a bond issue. So, for instance, back from the 2015 bond authorization or election, we applied for IFA funding on the 2016 issue, and we got it, which was great. I mean, it was a big deal for us because it preserved some EDA capacity. We also applied for it on the 2017. However, the legislature has not yet appropriated new money to allow for us to receive IFA funding on that issue. So as I was visiting with Mr. Rosales before the meeting, if at some point the state legislature will appropriate more state funding, we'd have the opportunity to not only get it on the 2017, but maybe a potential future issuance, from a prospective authorization such as the one you're talking about tonight. So that would be very important. But for now, we can't assume that you'll receive IFA on any future issues. We have assumed that you will max out EDA funding with the new authorization. The variables that are very important whenever we're doing a capacity analysis or just running a tax rate analysis, obviously the tax base. We've had to make assumptions on what the tax base will do over several years. We're hoping that over time that we're conservative. If we are conservative, if you look at the bottom, if we are conservative, what that means is if the tax base grows higher than what we think, you'll create future capacity for future issuances as well, or have the ability to potentially lower the tax rate lower than what we're calculating at this point. Refined average daily attendance. All of your state funding is based upon your refined, on the INS side, your state funding. The EDA and the IFA is based upon your refined average daily attendance. So we've actually assumed that you would decrease year to year for several years to hopefully, again, be conservative. But it's important in calculating both of those funding percentages. So the better your refined ADA, the more state funding you receive. And then interest rates. As I mentioned, we won't know what the rates are going to be until you actually sell the bonds. Right now, they're literally at historically low levels, some of the lowest levels in my lifetime. And we have used cushion on top of where we are currently to once again hopefully be conservative in our analysis. The term, we'd all like to have a 10 or a 15-year mortgage because we'd pay a lot less interest, but that would mean our annual payment is higher. So the shorter the term, the less we pay in interest, but the higher our payment would be. A longer term, the lower your payment will be, but the more interest you'll pay. You don't want the term to exceed the useful life of your projects, but typically when you're talking about bricks and mortar, your project's going to last a lot longer than the terms that we're using. Just to give you an idea, this is a little dated because this was back from once again from the meeting that we had with the committee. But this is a 20-year bond buyer index. What this should show you, or what this does show you, is the 20-year bond yield on 20 different issues throughout the country, and it's just meant to kind of give you an idea of where the long-term tax-exempt interest rate market is. And if you go all the way over to the left, that's way back in 1981, and rates were above 13%. If you go all the way back over to the right there, you can see where rates were just about a little over a month ago. And as of this last week, that number was actually in the 330 range. So it's come down even further. So like I said, right now, we're at historically low rates in terms of where we've been over a long period of time. And then the blue just shows what that index has done over the last year. Okay, the assumptions that we've used for the tax base and refined ADA are listed on this page. You can see on your tax base in 2026, we've assumed zero growth after that. So hopefully that's conservative. Hopefully that won't be the case. And if you actually do continue to grow, that'll open up capacity for future authorizations, because as of right now, the max scenario, we're assuming a 50-cent INS rate or close to it for the life of the bond. And a great question that one of the committee members asked was, well, when will we have the ability to issue more bonds, because you're showing we're at 50 cents forever? And I pointed back to 2026, we're saying 0%. So if you're actually clipping along at 1 or 2%, the tax rate would go down if that growth continues, which would allow for a future authorization. But at this point, we've only assumed growth through 2025. Over on your average daily attendance, you can see what we've assumed, 1% decline in your ADA all the way through 2027. And then we calculated what the state and local funding percentages would be under EDA and IFA year to year over there on the far right. And you can see that state percentages goes down, and it goes down for two reasons. One, because your tax base is going up, but two, because we're making the assumption that your refined average daily attendance would go down. So those two things combined would lower that percentage. And I will say that's another thing the legislature hopefully can do at some point in time, is that the yield under these two programs has not changed since 1999. So they haven't upped the yield on these two state funding programs since 1999. If they would at some point do that, and I think it's been discussed, that would help as well. Scenario observations, we had assumed that you would issue the amounts in two equal issuances for each scenario in 2020 and then 2021. We assumed 30-year terms. We assumed interest rates as of July 15th, 2019, plus 50 basis points or 0.5% on the 2020 issue, plus 75 basis points on the 21 issue. With rates having done what they've done over the last month and a half, really the cushion we have is probably right now plus 75 basis points or 0.75% on the 2020 and plus a full % on the 2021. So if rates will stay, close to the levels, even go up a little bit, we'll still be in better shape, hopefully, than what we're presenting here. And once again, the AAA rating as a result, the PSF, your fantastic AA and AA2 ratings will allow us to get the lowest rates available. And as I mentioned, if your tax base or refined ADA comes in better than assumptions, your tax rate could go down, or you could issue more at some point. Or if it comes in lower than our assumptions, we have some INS fund balance we can use. We also have potential future refundings or restructurings that we could do as well in order to make certain that we stay at or below 50 cents. The scenarios that we had looked at, if you look over at the top left here, we looked at 200 million, 300 million, and then 393, which was the calculated maximum amount based upon our assumptions, interest rate, tax base, and refined ADA. That 393 was the max that we could do and stay at or below 50 cents. Once again, issued in equal amounts in 2020 and 21, as shown in column 2 and 3. The new EDA funding that you could receive is shown in column 4, and I'll point out that you can see that the EDA funding you receive on the 300 million is the exact same as the 393, and that's because the 300 million maximizes your EDA funding. So any amount we go over and above 300 million, we're not going to receive any extra EDA funding. So it's the same amount. The INS contribution that we would be using to manage the tax rate for each of the scenarios, I believe you have between 8 and 9 million, if I'm not mistaken, in INS fund balance. We'd be using a little bit of it there in column 5. The maximum INS tax rate is in column 6 for each of the scenarios, less your current tax rate in column 7. The tax rate that we're projecting that you set for 2019-20, which is the same as last year of 28.5 cents. So the maximum INS tax increase is shown in column 8. And then I've just graphed that below. And once again, you see that straight line the whole way, but remember, we're assuming no growth in tax base after 2025. So if 2025, we can see, even if we just grow 1%, you could see those lines go down a little bit. What that impact is on homeowners within Ysleta ISD, taking into consideration not only the state mandatory $25,000 homestead exemption, but also your 20% local option, you can see for the different home values that are listed between column 3 and column 10, what the annual increase would be, one-time annual increase would be for those different home values. In the column 6, you see I've got that number in red. That was the median home value, I believe, that was given to us by the appraisal district. And then at the bottom, and I'll kind of show you this here in just a second on the next slide, but note that Ysleta ISD is, I believe, one of the very few districts in the state, and I think in the area, the only one in the area that provides this 20% local option. I had explained to the committee that a lot of times what I do is I will show, people want to know, well, what's our tax rate versus our neighbors' tax rates? But in this case, because you offer this local option, it's really not an apples to apples comparison. You're comparing apples and oranges, and I'll show you why on this next slide. And I try to go through this, and hopefully it won't be very confusing because I've tried to just simplify it with round tax rates. But on the left, let's assume a $100,000 home value for Ysleta ISD versus $100,000 of home value for other districts on the far right. Taxpayers in both districts get a $25,000 homestead exemption, but Ysleta ISD taxpayers also get that 20% local option. So the net taxable value, or the value that a homeowner in Ysleta ISD is paying taxes on, is $55,000, whereas 99% of the other districts in the state, including those in the area, are paying on $75,000 of value. So if I assume just a flat $1.50 tax rate, your bill as an Ysleta ISD taxpayer with $100,000 of home value would be $825. However, that same $1.50 tax rate, taxpayers in other districts would pay $1,125. And so what I did below that is I said, okay, with the 20% local option, what tax rate would an Ysleta ISD taxpayer have to pay in order to come up with the same $1,125 that another district has to pay? Well, it would be a $2.04 tax rate, which is not even a legal tax rate. That's just math. So a $2.045 total tax rate is the same as a $1.50 tax rate in another district in terms of actual dollars paid by somebody with a $100,000 home. And then I did the opposite. I said, well, in other districts, what tax rate would they have to pay to equate to the $825 that a Ysleta ISD taxpayer would pay on their $100,000 home? And the other districts would have to be at a $1.10 tax rate. So a $1.10 tax rate in another district is the same to their taxpayers as a $1.50 tax rate would be on an Ysleta ISD taxpayer. Does that make sense, I hope? And then lastly, wanted to kind of bring up, kind of in the middle of all this, we're still kind of trying to figure out, and I know Ms. Leeper and her staff are as well, trying to figure out what, the new legislation means to the district. But what we do know is that your M&O rate for this upcoming year, as you all are aware, is being compressed. So this year this last year, you were at $1.17. This upcoming year, you're going to be at $1.0684. So right there is a roughly 10-cent decrease. I'm assuming you set the same M&O rate, so you're getting roughly a 10-cent tax rate decrease. If this election, if you decide to call it, were to pass, your INS tax rate would not change until the 2020-2021 year, our fiscal year 2021. So this current year, it would stay at 28.5. The year after that, it would go to the tax rates that I had mentioned. So for that $200 million scenario, for instance, the total rate would be $1.4284, which is actually lower than what it has been historically. And if you go down to 393, yes, it's at $1.5681, but instead of a 21-cent roughly INS tax rate, or excuse me, M&O tax rate increase, it's really a net about 20 because you're going down 10 pennies on the M&O. 10 cents because you're going down 10 cents on the M&O rate. So as a result of the compression of the M&O rate, everybody's tax rates are going to go down. So really the net impact versus where you've been is only 10 or 11 cents if you went with that maximum issuance scenario. And the belief is that your M&O rate will be even further compressed next year, probably not by the same 10 cents, but the legislation will call for it to be compressed a little bit more. So you'll probably be looking at an M&O decrease this time next year as well.
Sir,
Yes.
if that does happen, how will that affect this 156 estimate that you have?
I'm sorry?
In 2021, if that does happen, how or when will it affect the 156.81 estimate that you have once the bond, if it does?
When would that go into effect?
No. If there's more of a decrease again this
Mhm.
next year,
Mhm.
right? What we're expecting, what will the amount then be? The end result, the 156 on the right-hand column.
Well, I don't think we know, or I don't know
Okay.
yet the level that the second year of compression is going to be. So the $1.5681 assumes that you would stay at the same M&O rate next year that you're about to set right now. But I believe that your M&O rate next year will be compressed even further. I just don't know what that amount is. So I've conservatively assumed that it would stay at the same level. But I think it'll go down, yeah, a penny or two more maybe is the thought. So it won't, completely reduce the impact of the bond election to where it's a net zero, but I think it'll reduce it even further in terms of the total tax rate. A good question. And so that was the information that I had presented to the committee. Is there any questions that the board may have?
I have a question.
Yes, sir, Mr. Soltero.
Can we go back to your slide 14? Do you still have that there?
Slide 14. Yes, sir.
Hang on a second. I can't see it here. The 2, 3, 4, the fourth bullet there. The second part of that sentence. I'm sorry, let me get closer to this. And it said, means that the YSD bonds will achieve the lowest interest rates available in the financial marketplace on any given issuance day.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I understand the concept of the issuance day, but let me ask you along this, if for some reason the bond wasn't passed tonight, approval for the bond wasn't passed tonight, and we waited until May of next year, how does that impact the interest rate? What does that do to us?
That's completely dependent upon what interest rates will do between now and then, and I will tell you that if I tell you what rates are going to do, there's a 50% chance I'm going to be right and a 50% chance I'll be wrong. There's so many factors that go into.
Well, I understand that, and so I'm asking you to pull your crystal ball or your rose-colored glasses, one of the two, and tell me what you think. So.
Well, I would think, but since we're at the lowest levels we've been in quite some time, I would think as we go into, let's say, middle of next year, that you would see rates trickle up some. I know there's been discussion of a potential for a recession. Yeah. If that were to happen, you'd probably see interest rates stay at the same level they're at right now. So I guess what I would tell you is I don't know that I could say that they'd be markedly different, but I certainly can't make any guarantees one way or the other on that. But
I understand that, and I appreciate your candor. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you,
sir.
Jeff.
All right. Trustee Lucero, do we have any citizens' input? Are you going to introduce your principals?
Not yet. During the superintendent's report. No problem.
Yes, we do. Will Mr. Ramon Mendoza please come up?
Mr. President, Dr. La Torre, trustees, I understand you guys are going out for a bond election, and I understand there's a lot of things on it. And I come to understand also that there's a lot of things that aren't equitable across the district. You need to look at it again before you start voting and make sure it's equitable. Make sure that the money you're spreading around gets spread around right. I know several schools that aren't getting anything, and that's not fair. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
The parents of Alicia Chacon.
Hello. We're here on behalf of the school of Alicia Chacon. We wanted to also, following what the gentleman said before us regarding the money for the schools. This is my first year as a parent to one of the students. My son's in kindergarten. He's a 5-year-old. We did meet with the principal, Mr. Cadena, We brought up issues regarding security at the school. We don't think that it's being implemented properly. There's also issues with the HVAC service. It's hot in the summer, it's cold in the winter, and there's also leaking in the classrooms. And that also ties into what he said, is where the schools are not getting money equally to get the things repaired that need to be repaired and to address the issues that need to be addressed. Mr. Cadena did offer some resolutions to the issues that we brought up, because there was an incident last Friday where a kinder student did get lost because they're going out into portables to go to class now. And we were against that because they're too small to be walking across a street to get to their classroom. They have to cross the parking lot. And to go to the restroom from the portable, they have to walk from the edge of the campus next to an open gate where the portable is positioned all the way to the back to the cafeteria. And that didn't work for us. It's too dangerous for 5-year-olds to be doing that. My son actually was one of the students who was confused the first day and actually walked to the front of the school. Another issue that we wanted to bring up was that I don't think that they're implementing the ringer on the door where you have to ring to be let in. I was able to walk into the school. The doors are not locked. So we do want to see if the security at the school could be made more of a priority. Because if I walked in, anybody could walk in. Everybody before me walked in, and everybody after me walked in as well. I did not have to ring the sensor on the door to be let in. And I have 2 older students at Ysleta schools as well, one in high school and one in middle school. And at both of those schools, both doors are locked. I cannot get in until I ring the doorbell. So I don't see what the difference would be, especially at a school with such small children. Just the security. The security is a big issue for us. We did have one student drop from our classroom because of it. She left the program, which I didn't think was fair, but her mom was really concerned about it. And it appeared when she went and met with him, she didn't get the answers that she was hoping she would get, or the resolutions that she was hoping she would get. He did say that he did request a security guard. We're hoping that comes through sooner than later before anything happens. We don't want to wait till something happens so that something can get done. I don't know, did anybody have? We also asked if he could close the main gate, where the portable is positioned at the edge of the campus, because they're in the front instead of the back. I don't know if that's going to be possible.
Thank you very much for bringing it to our
Thank you.
attention.
Ms. Deborah Torres?
Good evening. My name is Deborah Torres, and I'm president of a neighborhood association. I was selected as one of many to sit on the Facility Advisory Committee. And as such, I wanted to share with you what experience I came away with after going through this process. First of all, I'm primarily going to be addressing the process. It appeared that the powers that be had a prior agenda, and that the FAC was either a rubber stamp or a means to an end. And why do I say that? Well, first of all, I'm going to give you a couple of examples. Why were we taken to campuses to address issues that existed there, needs that needed to be resolved, yet not have those issues listed as primary priorities when it came to voting? Another issue was the time allotted for voting. I felt that we were rushed when it came down to casting votes for the project. We were given a 2-hour window, so we were racing against the clock, and when we should have been allotted more time to adequately ask questions and consider the issues before us before casting a vote. In our process, the FAC was charged with making decisions that would be innovative, engaging, safe, and equitable educational experiences for our students. Equity is giving everyone what they need to be successful, everyone. And because of my experience on the fact, I feel that we're not at a point where the district could cast a vote in favor of a bond. I think we need to go back and revisit it and do it differently than it was done before. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Arlinda Valencia, YTA President.
Good evening. Good evening, Dr. La Torre, President of CHOA and Board of Trustees. I'm Orlinda Valencia, and I'm President of the Ysleta Teachers Association. And I'm here tonight to speak to you about the bond. This evening, you will be making an important decision, whether you go out for a bond election in November or not. As president of the largest association in Ysleta, my responsibility is to make sure that teachers and students have a great learning environment. The bond before you has several new schools and some renovations. And we need that. It's very much needed. However, I'm here to tell you tonight that the most important thing on that list are the modernization of the HVAC units throughout the district, which is at a cost of $134 million. And that's for everyone. They're not at all going just to one area, it's going to everyone. It's important for you to remember that we live in a time when students and teachers should be warm in the winter and cool in the summer. This should not be a controversial issue. This year, we have had 39 days above 100 degrees. And that is a trend that has been going up for the past several years. And summer's not over. And I agree with the mothers of Ysleta Chacon. They are in that school. It is hot. We need to do something about that. And it can't wait for the bond. Our teachers work very hard in servicing each and every one of their students. Think about how things are in your own home when the heating and cooling aren't working. When teachers and students are cold or hot, it makes the job of teaching and learning more difficult than ever. The bond also has upgrades to security throughout the district. Today, it is imperative to reevaluate our security measures. We need more cameras, and most of all, we need visible security on all of our campuses. The safety of our students should not be put on the back burner. It must be a priority, and not later, but now. The bond committee met last week, and we all discussed the pros and the cons of going out for a bond in November. In the end of our discussion, the pros outweighed the cons by a huge margin. One of the cons I heard was that we should wait until May because we may lose the election in November. I'm here to tell you that you can't make a decision based on the fear of losing. Fear of failure is not the way to make good policy, because the greater fear should be failing our students. If we lose, we lose, but at least we tried. If you believe that a bond will help our students, it's good for students, then vote yes. Nothing else should stand in the way of progress, especially when children should always come first. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
The order of business shall be set out in this posted agenda unless changed by consensus of the board. Are there any other items you wish to pull? Thank you. The agenda will be considered the consensus of the board. As a taxing entity and per TEC 44.004, under certain circumstances, the Board of Trustees must hold a public hearing to discuss and set the district's tax rate on an annual basis. The notice of the public hearing to discuss the tax rate was published in the El Paso Times on August 4th, 2019. Notice of the rescheduling of the public hearing to August 19, 2019 was announced and posted on the district's website. This is a hearing for that purpose. The Board of Trustees appreciates and welcomes your input during the public hearing. Please observe the following rules. Individuals wishing to speak on the district's tax rate are limited to 3 minutes. If you have not signed up on the sign-in sheet to speak, please do so at this time, located on the table by the entry door. If you are part of a group or more than 5 persons, please select a spokesperson to speak for the group. Dr. De La Torre, is there a presentation regarding the public hearing?
Yes, President Ochoa, members of the board, our Chief Financial and Operational Officer, Mrs. Linda Leeper, will lead in that presentation.
Good evening, President Ochoa, members of the board, and Dr. De La Torre. I have a tax rate comparison that's actually very similar to what Mr. Robert just showed you. A couple of things that are different is that at the bottom, you can see the average single-family dwelling value for each of the major school districts in El Paso County is portrayed there. For purposes of comparison, it's very difficult when it's not apples to apples, so we've used $125,000 average home value for each of the 3 school districts. On the far right is the 2018 tax comparison. I'm going to walk you through the 2019 tax rate. So with each of the 3 districts having an average home value of $125,000, as Mr. Robert mentioned, Ysleta is the only one that has the optional 20% homestead exemption. If you subtract that, we then have $125,000 homes in the other 2 districts compared to a $100,000 home here. Then we apply the mandatory state exemption of $25,000, further reducing our taxable home value to $75,000 compared to $100,000 in the other districts. And then, as he mentioned, our tax rate, and this is the total, has been compressed from last year. So this year it's approximately 10 cents less at $1.35 and 3 cents. That's per $100 evaluation, meaning that in Ysleta you would pay $1,015 on a $125,000 home compared to $1,369 in Socorro and $1,268 in El Paso. The difference then between El Paso and Ysleta is $253 for a taxpayer in an EPISD, and then Socorro's taxpayers pay $354 more than those in Ysleta. Our tax rate last year, you can see in the far right column on the same row at $1.45, and this year we're asking you to approve a tax rate of $1.35 and 3/10. And I was asked to reiterate this for the board and the community. So if the board, on the action item number 1, I believe, which is the bond order, if the board opts to go forward with that, calling that bond election, any additional tax increase that's related to that voter approval will not take effect until a new tax rate is adopted at the earliest of August 2020. Does that make sense? So we're adopting one this August. We won't even consider adopting another one with an increase related to the bond until August 2020. Any questions?
I just want to say thank you for the presentation and the fact that we're able, due to our state delegation, our state, lower the tax rate in some sense. It's helpful to our constituents and our taxpayers for this cycle, and it's much appreciated. Although when the tax rate does go up, and if we do go for the bond, it's kind of a big hit at one time, and that does concern me a little bit. I don't know if you can talk a little bit about that.
Well, I think as Mr. Robert mentioned, if we sold $393 million in principal, the tax rate based on the assumptions he used would increase by 0.2147 cents, something like that. And so, yes, they will see an increase. It's still at 200 million. It was still less than what they're paying now. At 300 million, it's roughly 21 cents more. Again, though, next year they may compress the M&O rate. The state will. And if the state does so, it's not going to be as high as we anticipate. Thank you.
Thank you. Secretary Lucero, do we have anyone signed up to speak on the tax rate public hearing?
No, sir.
No? Dr. De La Torre, do you have a report for us this evening?
Yes, President Ochoa, members of the board, guests, good evening and thank you. The back-to-school season is typically a busy and exciting time for our community. This year, however, it has been permeated by loss and sadness over a senseless act of violence that claimed the lives of 22 people. On behalf of the Ysleta Independent School District, we want to emphasize that we stand in solidarity with our city as we work together to strengthen our sense of security, safety, and normalcy. We send our deepest sympathies to the victims and their loved ones and remain committed to providing safe, supportive, and innovative learning environments at all of our schools for the betterment of all of our families and our employees. In light of the cancellation of our annual Back to School Expo, we have chosen to distribute the 2,000 backpacks filled with school supplies equitably among all of our campuses. Many of the backpacks were donated in memory of Ezra Chacon, a Riverside High School graduate and Buffalo Bills superfan known as Pancho Villa. When he passed away in May, the Buffalo community raised over $100,000 to provide the backpacks to Ezra's hometown school district. We extend our greatest thanks and appreciation to the Buffalo, New York community for their generous donation to our students. Tomorrow, August 20th, we will hold our annual convocation at the Don Haskins Center, where we will reconnect, inform, motivate our staff and students, teachers, in their journey toward another successful year in the Ysleta Independent School District. On Monday, August 26th, we welcome back approximately 41,000 students to our campuses for the start of the 2019-2020 school year. 2 days later, on Wednesday, August 28th, we will hold a special ceremony with a national foundation that has chosen to donate backpacks with school supplies for the entire 6th grade class at Rio Bravo Middle School. The name of the foundation will be revealed on the day of the event, but it is one that is very close to El Paso's heart. Additionally, and finally, before I introduce some very special people, I want to thank our local elected officials who rallied around our school district and around the right of our football team at Eastwood High School to compete against Plano High School in early September. When the Plano Independent School District made a decision to cancel the event, the outpouring of support and aid from all of not just our elected officials, but school board members that sit here before you, our mayor, our city manager, and believe it or not, mayors and city managers from across Texas who found the decision offensive and insensitive given what our community has experienced over the last 30 days. Without that kind of advocacy and without that kind of support, it is less likely that this game would move forward, and yet we will play the Plano High School football team as planned, albeit at a different venue, a beautiful venue, belonging to the Dallas Cowboys and referred to as the Ford Center at Star Field in Frisco, Texas, on Thursday, September 5th, 2019. I believe kickoff is at 7 o'clock, and we're expecting a large crowd, great representation from the El Paso community. A lot of dignitaries will join us as we go out and watch that football game, because it's so much more than just a football game. It's important to this community. It's part of the healing process. It's an opportunity for two communities to come together and unite and overcome this tragic, senseless, and horrific act by one individual. So we're looking forward to that, not this week, but the following week. And again, we will remain El Paso strong. In terms of being the district, we feel stronger than ever. Let me introduce you to some very, very special people who will assume leadership roles in the school district. New principal, LeBaron Park Elementary School. Please welcome Miss Maritza Valderrama. Principal, new assignment, Mesa Vista Elementary School, Miss Norma Sierra. No stranger to the Northeast, leading North Star Elementary School, Miss Stephanie Larman. Pebble Hills Elementary School, Principal, Miss Irene Youngs. Principal, Tierra del Sol Elementary School, Miss Michelle Romero. That brand new shiny school, Del Valle Middle School Principal, Miss Amy Bejarano Alarcón. Coming closer to town, Desert View Middle School Principal, Mr. Javier Salgado, the veteran. Oh, that's why I didn't think he had to be here. Talk to him later. Parkland Middle School, Dr. Angela Reyna. Please give her a warm round of applause. Happiest, nicest guy on the planet. Help me welcome Principal, Riverside Middle School, Jake Valtierra. We've also got new faces here at the central office. Let me introduce you to the Director of Student Health Services, Miss Sylvia Belmontes. Director, Secondary Personnel, Dr. Blanca Lopez. And our new Director of Innovative Learning, Miss Shelley Smallwood. Mr. Guzman's a veteran, but I'm going to introduce him anyway because they left him off here. Coming back home, he was at one time, I think, a teacher and an instructional coach. He was phenomenal. That's why he became a principal, but he's going back to be the new principal at Scottsdale Elementary School, Mr. Juan Guzman. We're proud to welcome, delighted to welcome these exceptional leaders to their new campuses and to our central office, and we look forward to their knowledge, expertise, and innovation that they bring to the Ysleta Independent School District, the district. Welcome, delighted to have you all. Yes, sir, that's it.
Okay, thank you, Dr. De La Torre. The order of the agenda has been approved. May I have an electronic motion and second on the consent items listed on the agenda as recommended by the administration?
Mr. President, I moved to approve the remaining consent agenda items listed on this agenda as recommended by administration.
May I have a second? It's not working. Okay. Okay. Mr. Kuder, we have a second? Please read the motion. She reads the motion. Okay. Okay. We have a second by Mr. Kuder. Please cast your electronic votes.
You need to get
It's frozen.
over to your agenda. Press it again. One more time. Okay. It'll do it. Okay.
Oh, there it is. You okay? All right, all votes have been cast. Results are 7 in favor, none opposed, 0 opposed. The order of the agenda has been approved. Are there any policy items you wish to pull for a separate motion or discussion? May I have an electronic motion and second on the remaining, on the policy agenda items listed on the agenda as recommended by the administration?
Mr. President, I move to approve the policy agenda items listed on this agenda as recommended by the administration.
May I have a second?
Oh, I seconded.
Connie Woodruff has seconded. All votes have been cast. Results are 7 in favor, 0 opposed. So where do we go from here? Order calling for the bond election November 5th, 2019. Using your electronic hand, is there any discussion? Mr. Ramirez?
Thank you, President Ochoa. This evening, I'm asking the board to give serious consideration to the action we're supposed to be taking tonight. Last Monday, when we were doing the presentation during workshop, I will tell you, I was very upset about the outcomes and the results of this, and disappointed with the recommendations. But I understood that you know, everybody had to kind of keep an eye out on their learning communities and advocate for what they needed to do. However, when it was shared with me that one of the comments about my particular learning community was the reason you didn't get anything is because you people don't vote, let me tell you, it turned into a little more than anger. And so it took me a couple of days to calm down and figure out what I wanted to do. And so this evening, I would ask that this board can reconsider approving this bond, not because I'm angry that the Ysleta learning community did not get everything, they didn't get anything at all out of this bond issue. Yeah, there's going to be some dollars to be spent, but that we need to go back and reconsider the things that need to be done. Late Friday afternoon, we received a BC from Dr. De La Torre outlining the bond and the recommendation and how they came to that. And it was interesting that one of the areas that I thought we had been talking about for the last 2 years was not at the top of the list, and that was all the safety issues about building foyers for elementary schools, about ensuring that we had more security in place, and even things like fencing and stuff like that. Guess what? It's on the BC. I think that's an appropriate thing to include. I will not make political hay out of what happened a couple of weeks ago. We just need to protect our kids at all time, regardless. Whether we build fences, we build foyers, we put special glass, put more security guards, more police officers, we need to do what we need to do this, to protect our children. The second thing is all the facilities for the entire school district. I'm appreciative of Ms. Valencia and her comments. Our schools were built at a different time for a different world. And by the way, I'm from that generation where we used to start after Labor Day, and then we ended by Memorial Day. So we didn't get the severe heat and all that stuff like that. One of the common recommendations I hear from principals and from teachers, when visiting schools and talking to them, is that, you know, what we really need to line up our calendar at some time in the future where we start earlier rather than later. And so I don't want to start any controversy on that yet, okay? But I've heard that. And so if we ever decide to become a district of innovation, that's something we could do. But I can tell you, my wife works for another school district. They've been in since the first week of August. It's been horrible in her school, okay? Her kids started last week, but it's been absolutely horrible in their school with the heat. When you go talk to a group of teachers or you've been invited to an event and you're standing there and you're just pouring sweat, you know, and I was one of those students. I can't concentrate when I don't feel well, you know, and I can't when I'm not comfortable. And so I think things like heating and cooling are absolutely important, regardless of whether they have a swamp cooler in them now and, you know, we're going to do kind for kind and that sort of thing. I think things like fire sprinklers have to be considered in all our schools. We have some very, very old buildings. We have other more important things, I think, that all the schools need, including better bathroom facilities, perhaps updating kitchens and that sort of thing. So, again, I'm not happy with a lack of consideration that this group did not give to the Ysleta learning community. But I'm concerned that we need to focus on different things. We need to focus on whatever that, somebody used a number earlier. I don't know where that number came from for HVAC and for other things. We need to focus on that. And I would say to my fellow trustees here on the board, I'm not asking you to kill the bond. I'm just saying we always have time to do the right thing. We always have time to do the right thing. I'm not trying to hurt anybody's learning community. I want you to have your schools. Our kids deserve that. Our teachers deserve that. Our administrators deserve that. But I'm telling you that let's take the time. Let's reconsider this. Trustees, at the end of the day, that responsibility is ours. It's not the FAC, it's not anybody else's, it's our responsibility. If we're unhappy with something, then let's go ahead and show our leadership now and say, we're gonna wait until May, but between now and then, we're gonna sit down, we're gonna put pencil to paper, and we're gonna get this right. And we take the responsibility for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ramirez. Next speaker, Mr. Cudero.
I also had concerns about the bond, as Mr. Ramirez stated at first, but as I was pondering over all the information that was given to me and whether it was the right time, the right decision, there was one thing I came across on a piece of paper, and this might sound incredibly corny, but it's honestly what kind of let me sleep at peace, was at the top of a lot of the documents that we have and a lot of our shirts, we say, we deliver excellence. And I thought about what does we deliver excellence mean? And when we think about we deliver excellence, it means that we expect the very best of our students and our educators. We expect them to reach their maximum potential as educators and as students. But I also think it means that we as a board have to deliver excellence. And one of the tasks that we have, the most important task that we have, is creating a learning environment that is going to allow our educators and our students to be successful in every possible way, whether it be in the classroom, on the athletic fields, in the fine arts, in whatever capacity that they are involved with the district. And so I thought about that, and I realized that it is our duty to provide the best possible facilities. Does it mean, as Ms. Valencia said, that we're going to win the election? Absolutely not. It's our job to go out there and show the community why it's important, why it's necessary. But I feel very at ease going to bed feeling that this bond is important for our community, that we need to provide the best possible facilities in all aspects for all communities. And I think sometimes we get confused with what the word equity means. Equity does not mean equal. Equity means treating the communities with what they need at the time that they need it. When we look at this bond and when we look at the 2015 bond, you cannot look at this as two separate documents or two separate bonds. It is a continuation of a process. Does that mean that every single learning community got everything that they wanted? Absolutely not. When we first looked at the bond proposals, I think there was over $800 million in projects. That means that's how much things our experts looked at and said, your district needs a lot of work. There's a lot of things that we need to take care of. And we would love to pass an $800 million bond, but let's be realistic. That's not good for our community. That's not good for our constituents, and it's not fair. It would never pass. So we have to do it step by step, and it is a long-term process. Unfortunately, in the past, maybe the facilities that were needed help didn't get the help that they needed. We can't be worried about that. We need to be worried about what we can do as board members now. And that's a long process. It's not going to happen with this next bond. Even if we pass this next bond, it's not going to fix every issue. But it's going to begin the process. It's going to continue the process, actually, because we began the process in 2015. And so while we might not get everything we want, there's a lot of things that we're doing that's correct. And the fact is we are providing for HVAC. $134 million of things that are life cycles, things that our classrooms need that's going to affect the entire learning communities, all 7 learning communities. It is also providing for security. And as Mr. Ramirez said, we're not going to use security as an excuse to pass this bond. That would be completely unfair. It would be shallow. What we need to realize, though, is we live in a dangerous world, and it's terrifying. I never have felt unsafe in El Paso until that tragedy happened. It scared me. I'd never once ever thought of something like feeling unsafe in El Paso. And so we know that we have a new reality that we live in, and so security has become a big part of this bond. And when we call it to action a bond, it does not mean that we are taking everything that the committee has recommended and saying that is the final word. By no means. We express thanks to our committee for doing the work that they did, but it is our job as trustees to look at that, what they recommended, and make a final decision. And that's what we will do if we pass this bond and call it to action. It does not mean that everything that they recommend is what will be the final say. It just means we feel that it's necessary for our community and it's the right thing for our community. There's no greater investment of money than in education. And our students and our educators deserve the absolute best. And it is our duties as trustees to provide that best learning foundation for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cuder. Ms. Lucero.
Thank you. First, I would like to thank the bond committee as well as our staff who put in countless hours in the summer and the evenings to work hard as a collective group in the best interest of our students and teachers. Ysleta is one of the 3 largest districts in El Paso that currently have bond projects. We have proven to manage ours with fiscal excellence and, of course, on time and under budget. This success is something that, as a district and as a community, needs to be celebrated. Many times in communities, the challenges we face as leaders are heavily reported and shared, while our accomplishments do not seem to gain as much momentum. That said, the safety of our students, employees, and volunteers is the #1 priority, and that will never change. I believe as board members we're all on the same page on that particular item. Since we have managed our current bond so well, we have experienced cost savings, which we have been able to use for the Ballard Gym, as well as additional improvements at Eastwood High School and other facilities district-wide. I would like to propose any cost savings left from the current bond immediately be directed towards safety and HVAC needs, such as installing vestibules in the schools that do not have them, perimeter fencing and additional cameras. Furthermore, in the schools that have been identified with failing HVAC units, we work to replace ASAP, as our students and teachers need to be in a conducive learning environment. In November, there will be 2 other ballot items, initiatives asking the voters to raise their taxes. One of them is the City of El Paso to increase funding for police and fire. The last time we placed the item on the agenda with the city, we weren't as successful. When we placed the item on the agenda as a standalone, our voters overwhelmingly were in support, and I think that's something we definitely need to consider as we move forward. Since I became a board member here with YSD, I believe I've made it a point to be deliberate and thoughtful when making difficult decisions. I believe it is important as a trustee to consider all factors when asking the taxpayers for funds. As trustees, we are responsible for fiscal management and policy. We have to have a considerate and realistic pulse on our constituency. I believe we still have some work to do before asking the voters to approve this bond.
Thank you, Ms. Lucero. Mr. Rosales.
I think I won't keep anybody. I think there's been a lot of points brought up, and there's a lot of validity. I feel that once we as a board take the this issue to the public, I think that we need to make darn sure that we are aligning our needs accordingly. I thank the committee, the 80 of you out there that have dedicated so much time, and so taking that into account, that still requires us as a board to identify areas that are not being touched on. I'm very surprised that the security issue has been brought up. We spent, what, $8 million, Dr. La Torre, on the security?
On the last bond,
Yes.
closer to $15 million for the safety
15.
vestibule.
And I thought we had covered that, and apparently there's still some holes there. We need to look at that very seriously. As far as the board, I feel that we need to backtrack at this point and say, let's look at this thing, and if we have time, this is a lot of money for our residents. Another $400 million is a lot of money. And if we're going to go honestly and earnestly to the public, we got to have all our dots, our T's crossed and what have you, so that we make the best decisions possible for the betterment of our children. The only reason I'm here is for the betterment of the children, wherever they may be, whether it's Eastwood or Ysleta or anywhere else. Yes, there'll be areas that we cannot take care of all, because you got to keep in mind, I always tell myself, you know, we're trying to fix this district on things that were not done back when. And so we can't go back and take care of everything, which I think Mr. Caldera alluded to $800 million. But as we take these steps, we got to make darn sure that we're doing and crossing those areas correctly, even though we may have to go to May. I'd rather be sure of what we're doing than just jump into a frenzy of time. We got to do this and that. No, that's all I have, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rosales. Anybody else? I have a few words to say about this. I listen to my constituents here, and I respect all their viewpoints, and they have all legitimate reasons for what they said. I wrestled with this too, but what stands out more for me is our children. One is their environment, which I have strongly fought for since I came on the board, is having a nice environment for them, for the teachers, and for them to be cool, to be warm, without having to worry about any of that. But because of recent events, and now more so, I think that security of our children and our teachers and everybody that works for the Ysleta School District is vitally important. We cannot stand by and let things slide. I think that even though you all have legitimate reasons for having this bond postponed to May, I just don't want anything to happen because we postpone things, especially for our security. It's something I don't even want to think about. But my view is that security should go to the top of the list, whatever it takes. Have security officers there, put more cameras, and fix that problem that was brought up to us by the parents this evening. I have children in the Ysleta School District, and I worry about them. But that worry was something else until recently. And like Mr. Kuder pointed out, that it has brought to light something that I've never felt here in El Paso. And I don't want my children to feel that. I want them to feel secure and confident that they're getting the best education, which is why we're here. And this school board, it is a good school board. I mean, we all value each other's opinions, but in the long run, we do what is in our hearts, and we vote the way that we want to think from our soul. So, thank you.
Mr. Cruz, I have something to say. President, a year ago, I was at an event, and I had these little kids come up to me. Everybody knows here I coach, and the one thing that keeps coming to me, my mind, is when I see the little kids come up to me and tell me, "Mr. Bustillos, can you do something about our classroom? It's hot." HVAC, we know, is so much needed. Our kids, our teachers, you know, picking up a morale of our teachers, and I'm just speaking for my area. I like everybody says, everybody brings something to the table here. And I can speak for my area that bringing up the teachers, you know, just putting an air conditioner makes it so much more appealing for them to be there, to be comfortable, to be able to have the right tools for these kids, to be able to teach. Again, I think everybody's been affected by the tragedy, and that's just something that we need to do. Obviously, is the security. You know, I came back the other day and I saw some cameras that needed to be refurbished, to be fixed, either the camera or the monitors were out to date. Everybody knows they get a cell phone today and it's obsolete tomorrow. We need to upgrade. I didn't have an answer for that little kid, the little girl. And all I did was ask for them to help turn on the air conditioners, and they did. And we all know El Paso's gotten a little bit more humid, and they don't work. We need the HVAC for our teachers. We need the HVAC for our kids. And our time is now. For me, our time is now. We need that security because our time is now. We can't wait. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
I just want to say one more thing. I think it's important about the security. The security is, even if we pass the bond, which of course we're going to do as a board, whatever it is, the majority decides. But the security part, that needs to happen now. And we have the funds for that to happen now, especially where there are gaps. So to say, I don't want to sound political either, as Mr. Ramirez had said, and I don't want it to make it like that, but it needs to happen now. And we can do that now. We have it in our power to do it now. It's not the sole reason to pass this bond because we have the ability to do that now. And that is what we need to do.
Can I respond to that? Sure. I agree completely. It needs to be done now. But if we use every fund that is left over from our previous bond on just security, that means we can't do anything else for the rest of our campuses. We can't do HVAC. We can't do life cycle improvements. We can't do any big projects at all. And so while I agree completely that needs to be a priority, simply just because we live in a different world now from what it was in August 3rd, it doesn't mean that we'll get to everything else that we need. And so the bond is a continuation of not only security, but everything else that our district needs. And it's not going to fix every problem, but it's at least a step forward. And I think we're required to continue to progress. It takes bold leadership to put yourself out there and say, we need more to help our schools, but we can't hide behind the fact that we'll do it later. We'll get to it at some point because we're not guaranteed, as Mr. Ochoa said, we're not guaranteed to that.
I don't think we're hiding, Kodir. I think the reality is at the end of the day, safety is a priority, but we all have to answer to the taxpayers. The taxpayers are the ones who are going to carry this burden. And we have to also consider that when we're making these decisions. Safety, HVAC is always going to be a priority, and we have funds to at least prioritize where the most needs are.
Mr. Ochoa,
Yes, sir.
might I share something with the board?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I've heard some mention of the possibility of a May 2020 election, and I just want to share with the board some issues regarding holding an election in May of an even-numbered year. Because the partisan election primaries and runoff are in the spring of the even-numbered years, the election code recognizes that county elections administrators are normally very busy with that. And so the election code says that a county elections administrator is not required to administer any other elections. And so it's not required to administer elections in May of even-numbered years, such as May of 2020. And in fact, the last time the district contemplated a bond election in May of an even-numbered year, the then county elections administrator, who was the predecessor of Ms. Wise, her predecessor, said he wouldn't do it. And so the district at that point looked at the possibility of acquiring its own equipment, acquiring its own people to staff the election and so forth, and just ended up not doing it then, ended up doing it at a different uniform election day. So I just wanted to point out that it's not a foregone conclusion that the county elections administrator would be able or would be willing to administer this election, any election, in May of 2020. It was her predecessor, and I haven't spoken to her. I don't know if Mr. Braden has spoken to the current county election administrator about whether her attitude towards trying to administer a May 2020 election. I haven't spoken to her about it. I do know that her predecessor declined to do so, and he wasn't required to do so by law. That's all I wanted to share.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Safi. Any other comments?
Just a question I have in regards to your comment, and Mr. Safi, and I guess this is for the board, but I want you to be there. So what we're actually seeing here is we have a list of it on the agenda of the bond, but within that agenda we're lacking certain issues. Now my question to Dr. Latorre and Ms. Lindley Leeper, would we be able to, within ourselves, address the security issues that we're not taking into account on the bond priorities?
If you're asking whether or not the board has the authority,
No. Do we as a school district have resources that we could, I guess, improve on the security?
Are you
portion.
asking me if we have it within the operating budget or within 2015 bond savings?
Do we have the money? No.
Not to the level that we need. There's 20 million already built in for the vestibules,
Okay.
for fencing, and for cameras in the package that we presented. So no, I can't fund that out of operating or out of 2015.
Okay, the next question, do we have money to cover the holes that are not covered on the priority list?
No, sir, I don't believe we do.
We don't. Pardon me?
Do we know how much we have that we can put towards it, whether the bond goes to the
So
bond?
if you look at our most recent financial statement, I think our investment earnings this year are 6.2 million. And much of our investment earnings was already dedicated to take care of fire sprinklers, some furniture, and some of the things that were going to impact fund balance were shifted into the bond fund. So with the exception of a minor amount of about $3 million that's set aside to pay for the Bel Air baseball field when construction is complete, there are no other savings. They've all been allocated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Ochoa, may I clarify for Mr. Safi that November 2020 is a different issue? That's available from county administrator auction, administration.
However,
It's just May 2020.
Yeah, you're saying a whole year till November was not the issue.
which equates to about 20 million in inflation.
Yeah. All right, if there's no further discussion, may I have a motion? Mr. Kuder, read the motion.
Mr. President, I move to approve all matters incident and related to ordering and holding a bond election within the district on November 5th, 2019, including the adoption of an order pertaining thereto as presented, authorizing the district to issue bonds in the principal amount of $425 million.
I have a second by Ms. Woodruff. Please cast your electronic votes. All votes have been cast. Results are 4 in favor, 3 opposed. Order accepting the tax roll 2019 to 2020 using your electronic hand. Is there any discussion? If no further discussion, may I have a motion? Ms. Woodruff, would you read the motion?
Mr. President, I move to approve an order setting the 2019-20 tax rate, including separate components for maintenance and operations of 1.0683 and debt service of 0.2850 for a total of 1.3533 for $100 of evaluation.
Sorry.
The wrong one? Oh, I'm sorry.
You have to accept the tax roll first.
Oh, sorry about that. I move to approve an order accepting the tax roll as certified by the 2019 Appraisal Review Board and certified by the Chief Appraiser.
I have a second, by Mr. Kuder. Please cast your electronic votes. All votes have been cast. 7 approve. There's no 0. No. Okay. Number 3, order setting tax rate 2019 to 2020 using your electronic hand. Is there any discussion? If no further discussion, may I have a motion?
So I might as well do this
Ms.
one,
Woodruff,
too.
yes, would you read the
Sorry
motion?
about that. I practiced the last time. I move to approve an order setting the 2019-20 tax rate, including separate components for maintenance and operations of 1.0683 and debt service of 0.2850 for a total of 1.3533 per $100 evaluation.
I have a second by Mr. Kuder. Please cast your electronic votes. Results are 7 in favor, 0 opposed. Number 4, 2019-2020 Student Code of Conduct. Using your electronic hand, is there any discussion? If no further discussion, may I have a motion? Mr. Kuder, would you please read the motion?
Mr. President, I move to approve the 2019-2020 Student Code of Conduct in substantive form as presented, but adding duties of security personnel consistent with policy CKE local.
We have a second by Ms. Woodruff. Please cast your electronic votes. All votes have been cast, 7 in favor, 0 opposed. Number 5, TASB delegate and alternate designation. Using your electronic hand, is there any discussion? We haven't gotten rid of this. There we go. No further discussion. May I have a motion? Yeah.
I move to approve Trustee Woodruff as delegate. My bad, sorry. I move to approve Trustee Woodruff as delegate and Trustee Kudir as alternative delegate to serve as the board's voice in the TASB Delegate Assembly.
I have a second by Ms. Woodruff. Please cast your electronic votes. Results are 7 in favor, 0 opposed. Number 6, approval of award of YSD contract number 202000006 with the El Paso County Community College District. Using your electronic hand, is there any discussion? If no further discussion, may I have a motion? Ms. Woodruff, would you read the motion?
Mr. President, I move to approve award of YSD contract number 2020006, interlocal agreement with El Paso Community College District as shown in the contract as presented and contingent upon final negotiations and in-house council review.
We have a second by Mr. Kudir. Please cast your electronic votes. The results are in, 7 in favor, 6 in favor, 0 opposed, and 1 abstention. Number 7, approval of award YSD contract number 2020004 with the El Paso County Community College District. Using your electronic hand, is there any discussion? If no further discussion, may I have a motion? Ms. Woodruff, would you read the motion?
Mr. President, I move to approve award of YSD contract number 2020004, interlocal agreement with the El Paso Community College District as shown in the contract as presented and contingent upon final negotiations and in-house council review.
We have a second by Ms. Lucero. Please cast your electronic votes. Results are in, 6 in favor, 0 opposed, 1 abstention. Number 8, approval of award change order number 2 to YSD contract number 2018031 with Commercial Roofing Systems Incorporated. Using your electronic hand, is there any discussion? If no further discussion, may I have a motion? Mr. Kuder, please read the motion.
I move to approve award of change order number 2 to YISD contract number 2018031 with Commercial Roofing Systems Incorporated as shown in the contract as presented.
I have a second by Ms. Lucero. Please cast your electronic votes. Results are 7 approved, 0. There's 0 opposed. Right. The Board of Trustees has determined that a closed meeting of the Board of Trustees is required to discuss the items set forth in the posted agenda for this date. Such closed meeting is authorized by the Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code 551.001, including but not limited to the sections and purposes covered by the following section of the Texas Government Code: 551.071, 72, 73, 74, 76, 82, 127, 821, 83, and 84. Should any final action, decision, or vote be required with regard to any matter considered in closed session, the final action, decision, or vote shall be in the open meeting or at a subsequent public meeting with notice. The board will now move to the Rio Grande for closed session at 7:34. I reconvene this meeting of the Board of Trustees with Charlie Bustillos, Richard Cuder, Mike Rosales, Connie Woodruff, and Catherine Lucero, and myself, Cruz Ochoa. Mr. Soltero Ramirez couldn't make it with us today at this time. Time is 8:21. Consider and take possible action regarding the options for resolution of litigation in Guzman versus YSD, cause number 2017 DCV 1412. May I have a motion? Ms. Woodruff.
Mr. President, I authorize the district attorneys to continue settlement discussions as discussed in closed session.
Mr. Rosales has second. May you cast your votes, please? Okay. Somebody's not voting. Oh, yeah, never mind. Okay, the motion has passed, 6 yes, 0 no, and let's see. No, it's no vote, 1. 0 abstain. May I have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Adjourn. Good job, sir. Thank you. I could flex. It's like walking through a minefield.
Reading that.